The winner is Yul Brynner.
Because I won't give it back for anything in the world. Thank you very much.
At 57, Yul Brynner faced a truth he could not choreograph. Private letters surfaced, revealing a hidden relationship carefully kept from fans. The handwriting was unmistakable. The tenderness felt undeniable. Public Yul was steel and command. Private Yul was vulnerable and hungry for connection. Studios had once guarded him with lawyers and morality clauses. Now the past reached forward with ink and memory, threatening his perfected image. Reporters sniffed for scandal. Old friends lowered their eyes. Family braced for questions. Was the king of Siam, the pharaoh, the gunfighter, living a life in halves? The answer lived in those letters, and in a journey that began far from Hollywood spotlights. He was born Yul Borisovich Brynner in 1920, in Vladivostok. The port smelled of coal smoke and wet rope. His father, a Swiss-Russian engineer, kept distant hours. His mother told stories to fill the quiet. The family carried several worlds within them. Russian, Mongolian, and European threads braided into one child. Then came departures. His father left. Politics tightened like winter ice. Mother and son crossed borders, searching for safety and work. They reached Manchuria, then Harbin. Street markets clattered with tin cups and chopsticks. Brass bands paraded past creaking rickshaws. A boy listened and learned to disappear when needed. He found languages quickly. He played with accents as if they were new toys. In those years, he grew watchful. Survival demanded performance. Silence was its own costume. Paris followed. The city glowed in lamplight and cigarette haze. Gypsy jazz spilled from cellar clubs. Suits were narrow. Skirts swung at the knee. Painters drank, then argued about color. On the left bank, he learned the grammar of spectacle. He trained his body like an instrument. Acrobat, circus hand, a risk and a fall, an injury that put him on his back. Counting ceiling cracks. Pain visited often. He reportedly used opium at times. It dulled the noise but blurred the days. He drifted toward stages and cameras. Cabarets needed presence. He had it in spades. A shaved head became a signature for some acts. He learned guitar chords that could charm a table into silence. He watched performers craft personas out of thin air. Names were elastic. Stories were negotiable. The lesson cut deep. Reinvent fast or be left behind. The world around him policed difference. In Europe, between wars, men loved in shadows. Laws varied by street and season. Respectable faces carried private maps. In Russia, old codes lingered. In France, café tolerance shifted with the weather. Gossip traveled by whisper and folded note. To be marked as other risked work, reputation, and safety. He observed. And he took careful notes. Passing could be art. Passing could be armor. War clouds gathered. Borders hardened again. He sailed for America with his mother, chasing chance. Broadway lights promised a future. New York roared like a furnace. Radio studios hired strange accents. Acting schools welcomed raw hunger. He felt the pull of cameras like tidewater on stone. If he could master the stage, the screen might follow. New York hardened him, and then gave him a room with lights. He studied at Neighborhood Playhouse, chasing discipline and breath. He watched Sanford Meisner strip art down to listening. He learned to claim space with silence. Early jobs paid in scraps, radio gigs, modeling sessions. Little parts that taught big lessons. He worked backstage too. He directed cameras for live television at CBS. He learned how a lens breathes. He understood where eyes travel first. A producer heard the voice before seeing the face. Deep, commanding, dangerous. Auditions followed. Some rooms shut quickly, others leaned in. He tried hair off for a part and saw strangers flinch. The shaved head became myth. It turned a migrant kid into a timeless mask. Then came a book, a music box, and an offer. Rodgers and Hammerstein were mounting a new musical. The King and I needed a monarch who could sing authority into the air. He walked into a rehearsal hall and changed his life. Gertrude Lawrence met him with tea and a measuring glance. She played Anna with steel disguised as grace. Their duel became the drama. He learned to hold still while the room revolved. He practiced the polka until sweat darkened the floorboards. Opening night in 1951 arrived like thunder. The curtain lifted. The orchestra struck gold. He stepped forward and owned the void. The audience leaned back, smiling and a little afraid. Reviews were electric. Critics called him hypnotic, feline, and imperial. He won a Tony for the role. Matinees sold out. Tourists peered at the bald head from the mezzanine. Fans wrote letters scented with soap and perfume. Children copied the dance with outstretched arms. Broadway gave him a throne. Hollywood circled with contracts and watchful lawyers. 20th Century Fox came calling with film deals. Epic size, biblical size. He shot the 10 Commandments with a cobra stare. He faced Charlton Heston across painted deserts and carved palaces. He followed with Anastasia beside Ingrid Bergman. He carried danger like a scent, then softened it with a half-smile. In 1956, he returned to the king on film. The camera adored bone, light, and stillness. The Oscar arrived with a glittering hush. The studio system polished his edges and counted his minutes. Publicists shaped origin stories for hungry magazines. Exotic became a brand. Printed on lobby cards and lunch pails, he posed for stills like a king who remembered hunger. He guarded his privacy with locked doors and a sharp joke. He played chess with columnists. He let them win just enough times. Fame was a ship with strict rules. Morality clauses appeared in contracts with delicate language. Parties were curated like gallery shows. Dates were selected for photographs, not intimacy. He smiled through dizzy flashes and walked home alone. The image paid for freedom, yet demanded constant tribute. Success had arrived. So had the price of perfection. The double life began to feel like a second skin he could not peel away. The first whispers trailed from Paris like perfume after midnight. Biographers note an early attachment to Jean Cocteau, poet and maestro of masks. Cocteau introduced him to rooms where talent and desire mixed freely. Painters laughed, dancers smoked by windows. A young Yul listened and learned the grammar of hidden love. It was a school with no diploma, only scars and secrets. In New York, he found quiet in a small backstage corridor. Heard Hatfield moved like a sketch come to life. The star of Dorian Gray had the cool of marble. They reportedly shared late suppers and longer silences. Yul liked men who understood performance as survival. Heard liked men who could vanish in plain sight. They traded books and borrowed jackets. They kept the receipts in different wallets. It was safer that way. Marlene Dietrich cut through smoke like a knife wrapped in silk. She was a lover, a mentor, and sometimes a shield. With Marlene, he practiced straight lines for the cameras. With Marlene, he also learned how to hide in starlight. She knew which photographers asked fewer questions. She knew which hotels offered back stairs and a delayed elevator. When Marlene said go, doors moved. There were other bonds that lived in coded hours. On some evenings, he reportedly met a young Paul Newman after classes. Blue eyes matched blue shadows. They talked about control and the mechanics of stillness. Sometimes shoulders touched in the narrow space between costume racks. Sometimes the talk did not stop until dawn. Another time, in a borrowed house above the city, Marlon Brando arrived with stories and restless hands. Yul measured him like an opponent at a chessboard. Attraction did not erase rivalry. It intensified the match. They met again in cars that smelled of leather and gasoline. Both men loved the chase. Both men feared the net. Travel offered privacy that Los Angeles never granted. European sets felt looser and less watched. Producers counted pages while actors counted glances. In Madrid, a driver knew which restaurant had a back patio and a high hedge. In Rome, a papal city sprouted 1,000 secular corners. There, he reportedly connected with writer Manuel Puig years later. Puig adored myth and understood masks. They spoke about power and the price of a face the world will not forget. The talk grew warm, then careful. Always careful. Hollywood enforced virtue by contract. Clauses warned against scandal in tidy legal ink. Publicists monitored movements like air traffic. Parties had guest lists and seat maps. Dates were assigned with a smile. If he drifted off script, a studio car appeared at the curb. Sometimes he went for a drive around the block. Sometimes he returned to his mark and delivered the smile. The cost was measured in small daily erasures. A hand withdrawn. A pronoun changed mid-sentence. A weekend plan canceled with a telegram that sounded cheerful. He told himself he chose mystery to protect the work. He told himself privacy was a kingly trait. Yet at night, letters gathered on a desk in tight, tender lines. He wrote about fear and hunger for softness. He wrote about the relief of being seen without armor. A near miss hardened his caution. A bellboy reportedly saved a note left in a hotel ashtray. The signature was clear. The phrasing intimate. A whisper reached a columnist who liked money more than art. A lawyer intercepted the arrangement before it ripened into print. A donation found its way to the right charity. A set visit was granted to the right editor. The story died that week. It did not die in his chest. He realized the image could not flinch. He doubled his schedule and tightened his circles. He kept the letters locked behind wood and brass. He trusted only a handful of friends. The performance continued, flawless and exact. The risk, however, had found his scent and would not tire. Rumors sharpened in the late 1950s as the code weakened. The Hayes office still preached purity, but audiences changed. Tabloids smelled transition and circled like gulls. Confidential had taught a cruel business model. Hint, withhold. Cash in. Columnists asked softer questions with sharper eyes. Photographers lingered near service doors. A studio fixer warned him that whispers were aligning into a headline. A careless cabana party sparked the fuse. Someone mentioned a private guest list to the wrong man. A bellboy claimed he saw an embrace that lasted too long. An editor requested comments about bachelor habits between films. The questions looked harmless in print. They did not feel harmless at home. Lawyers read contracts and underlined morality clauses with blunt pencils. This was not Europe. This was commerce. Fox reminded him of brand obligations. Family magazines wanted cheerful profiles and staged candids. A new film needed clean promotion. A public romance was suggested, then scheduled. He complied, smiling with practiced warmth and measured distance. The photos ran on page 3 with bright captions. The whispers moved to page 6 and grew darker. Loyal friends closed ranks. Others kept their distance. The air changed at lunch. Work suffered in subtle ways. A script he loved went to a safer name. A European director delayed negotiations after a sponsor balked. The rejection arrived in polite cables with frozen grammar. He told himself it was a cycle. He told himself reputation would hold. But the calendar thinned. He traveled more, chasing landscape and quiet. He played chess alone in hotel rooms, listening to the thump of neighboring doors. One afternoon, a reporter pushed too hard. The question sounded like a joke, almost affectionate. It was not. Yul laughed and redirected with a story about childhood trains. The room laughed with him. The reporter did not. The exchange made a small column that weekend. It sat beside an advertisement for cologne. He felt both items selling something he did not want. A close associate advised a preemptive story about past romances with women. It felt like a script he had already played. He agreed anyway. A glossy magazine ran a spread with tailored nostalgia. The photos were perfect. The quotes were upright and carefully phrased. The piece steadied the waters in public. It did not calm the storm within. Then came the letters. A private correspondent asked for money in exchange for silence. The language was panicked and specific. The demand was small at first, then less small. He met with counsel. He met with a priest. He met with himself at 3 a.m. and felt a cold floor under his feet. Paying meant bondage. Refusing meant risk. He chose refusal and prepared for impact. Nothing printed that month. Yet the threat did not fade. He slept lightly and spoke less. Friends noticed the edges of a new caution. He was not broken, but he was bent. At his lowest, he left a party early and walked for hours. Neon flickered on puddles. Sirens wailed, then hushed. He needed a new plan that honored his work and his life. Change, when it arrived, came from a stage door rather than a studio gate. He found his way back through a familiar doorway. The stage. The king called again, and he answered with deeper gravity. Age sharpened the stillness. The polka felt like prayer now. Touring companies welcomed him like a weather front. Audiences leaned forward, recognizing a monarch who had learned humility. He refined the role until it fit like a second skin. The crown had weight. He could carry it without flinching. Cinema offered reinvention. The Magnificent Seven gave him flint and swagger. Westworld delivered a metal smile and haunted silence. He played machines and men with the same economy. A tilt of the head, a measured blink. Violence arrived like a rumor and left like a lesson. The camera remained a willing witness. He no longer chased it. He invited it to come closer and listen. He also widened his circle beyond sets. Photography became a steady companion. He framed strangers with gentle patience. He carried a guitar and sang with friends after curtain calls. He supported refugee causes and used fame as a lever. Speeches came carefully, without grandstanding. He preferred action and receipts. Fame could be harnessed if you held the reins firmly. Family deepened in unexpected directions. He adopted 2 Vietnamese daughters and guarded their privacy fiercely. He reveled in small rituals, school pickups, shared meals, quiet car rides with questions about homework and history. The house filled with languages again. It reminded him of childhood crossings and the fragile luck of safe harbor. Becoming a father renewed his patience and altered his priorities. Hollywood's grip loosened as new decades arrived. The old code weakened and finally fell. Younger stars tested different boundaries on screen and off. Journalists asked blunter questions about identity. Some colleagues spoke more freely than before. He watched with interest, then with a complicated smile. The world had shifted, but not evenly. Prejudice survived in softer clothes. Contracts changed their wording. The stakes did not disappear. Health forced its own truth. Years of smoking caught him in a slow net. Doctors named the enemy without ceremony. Lung cancer. He faced it with public candor. He recorded a message urging others to quit. The performer used his final close-up for service, not myth. The voice remained steady. The eyes held the lens without blinking. This time, the mask was honesty. He kept working while he could. Restaging. The King and I gave him purpose and shape. He fixed beats and tightened pauses. Every night mattered. He made ceremonies out of small backstage rituals. Tea, vocal warm-ups, a quiet nod to the wings. When the curtain rose, he offered work, not explanations. The audience understood. So did his friends. He had built a life from reinvention and control. He was finally learning to let the truth stand beside him, unhidden and unashamed. The letters remained locked away, but their meaning had changed. They were not a fuse anymore. They were a record of tenderness in a hard century. They set the stage for a final reckoning with image, love, and legacy. The image made him famous. The silences made him human. He mastered the pause, the glance, the sovereign stillness. Yet beneath that control lived a heart that wanted refuge. Private letters proved it. They were not weapons. They were lifelines tossed between islands of loneliness. They showed a man balancing duty, desire, and the law of reputation during a colder century. He was never only a mask. He was never only a myth. He was a migrant son who learned survival through reinvention. Then, paid for secrecy with sleep and breath. His legacy extends beyond statues and posters. It lives in the courage to claim one's interior life, even when the world punishes difference. Today, when identities speak more freely, his story warns and consoles. It warns us how image can police a soul. It consoles us by revealing the tenderness he preserved inside the machine of fame. If love is a risk, he took it in careful stages. If truth is a light, he learned to let it burn brighter near the end. What do you see when you look at Yul Brynner now? A king, a gunslinger, a cyborg, or a man who survived the price of wonder? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me which chapter surprised you most. If these hidden histories matter to you, Subscribe for the next story. We will open another door together and let the light in.